we all set, Elston? All right, it being 7 o'clock and it being January 9th, we'll open the Selectmen's meeting for January 9th, 2019. First item on the agenda is public comment. Any public comment? There is no public comment. The next item on the agenda is a review of the minutes. The minutes from December 19th, 2018 are available for review. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for December 19th, 2018.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve and accept the minutes for December 19th, 2018. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. Next item is KDP Growers Incorporated, marijuana cultivation and retail facility. So we would invite representatives from KDP Growers up. KRD. So it's KRD Growers?
KRD, yes.
Okay, we got it right now.
No problem, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Representatives from KRD Growers would like to introduce their company to the Board of Selectmen and discuss a proposal to site marijuana cultivation and retail store on Parker Street in Clinton. And so if you could start out by those who are going to be speaking, saying their names and addresses, that would be helpful.
Sure. My name's Sarah Grant. I'm an attorney at Smith, Costello and Crawford who represents KRD Growers. Do you want my address?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll let the other two introduce you.
Okay, my name is Jonathan Napoli. I'm a Director of Cultivation for KRD Growers. We're going to help design and build out the facility here. We're based out of Boston, Massachusetts.
Derek Ellerkamp, Georgetown, Massachusetts. I'll be the general manager of the operation.
Okay. So we'll turn the meeting over to you, and we're pleased to hear from you.
Great, thank you. So last week we sent along a response to the guidance that the Select Board had approved at last month's meeting, which included some business plan information, details on the site, as well as some standard operating procedures or summaries of standard operating procedures that KRD intends to submit to the state for when they apply for licensure. KRD has entered into a lease agreement for the property located at 86, 89, and 98 Parker Street, property in Clinton. It would serve as a cultivation and product manufacturing facility, as well as a small retail site. This would be for both medical and adult use licenses and sale of marijuana, and the part of the application process for the Cannabis Control Commission is not only showing site control but also showing a relationship and host community agreement with the host community, which would be Clinton in this case. So that's why KRD has come before you, is to request to speak, to enter into negotiations with the town of Clinton for a host community agreement.
Okay.
So, happy to answer any questions from the materials we submitted.
All right. Does anyone else want to have anything to say?
Just that we're very experienced operators and builders in this industry. We helped build and design the second facility to open in Massachusetts, which began back in 2014 and we opened in 2015. We're open 7 days a week, and in areas, not unlike Clinton, and we have very few problems, if any. And the town receives a lot of benefits, and a lot of the fears that people think about it before these things end up opening usually do not come to materialize.
Okay. And so now you're ready for questions from the board. Are there any questions from the board?
I do have a question. At the last Selectmen's meeting, I don't think you were present, but I did ask You're gonna be leasing from the property owner, but my fellow board of selectmen in the past has waived their taxes because they had a spill there many years ago. So I just need some documentation to say, hey, they did the cleanup, they used that tax money for that cleanup. Do you
Sure.
have it?
So what I have here is a letter that was prepared by our EPA consultant who reviewed the property. Obviously, KRD wasn't going to enter into a lease agreement for a property that would have ongoing mitigation issues. So I'm happy to hand that out to you as well as sort of summarize it for you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
So as you stated, this letter includes a bit of site history, just obviously, like many towns in Massachusetts, was an industrial area. And there was, as part of the purchase, or the lease agreement, we had an EPA consultant come in and take a look at the property. What that consultant determined was that a number of efforts have been made to clean up the property. They've been able to remediate the issues to a point where the groundwater and soil issues are taken care of. The one remaining issue in the property is a long-term air quality concern. They requested a 180-day extension on the remediation efforts with the Department of Environmental Protection, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, in order to fix that issue. Not only that, but if the landlord is unwilling or unable to take care of this issue, KRD is really in favor of this site, really likes the town of Clinton, and is more than happy to assist in remediating that issue, so that the site can be used. And part of a great aspect of the marijuana industry is that they're revitalizing a lot of these, industrial properties, and KRD is happy to contribute to that process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I believe Michael has something well, maybe he doesn't. Any other questions? Go ahead, Bill.
More observations than questions, but probably a question at the end. I'm sure you're aware that for a small town like Clinton, we feel like we're being inundated with these requests and applications. And part of that, we're new to this. I know it's a new industry, and we've been struggling with trying to be consistent with every applicant. I do want to compliment you on the package you submitted. You had the benefit of having our guideline for what we wanted to see, but it was a well put together, comprehensive submittal. To address the environmental issue, I think for the town to go forward with your organization, we're going to be insistent that the environmental issues that granted the owner a tax reduction have been addressed. That when your tenancy is over, we haven't forfeited the taxes and still have a dirty site in town. So we're going to ask for, I believe, some substantial documentation that those issues have been addressed or will be addressed by your process. And the other thing is, and I don't know where we stand in this, to be honest, is we're limited to 2 retail licenses in town. And how many applications do we have for retail?
This will be the
Board
second.
has
This will
approved
be the
one,
second.
and this is the second, yeah.
Okay,
So,
so I guess I would encourage you, if the board votes to support you, that you get creative in your community host agreement proposal to motivate us.
Certainly. I think ensuring that the property, is remediated can certainly be a part of the host community agreement, and making sure that that is an ongoing process, and both in the interest of the town, as well as the landlord, as well as KRD.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just add, I don't know, I'm sorry I had to step out, if the board hadn't discussed the zoning issue that was raised by the board at the last meeting. And on the town meeting floor, there was an amendment to clarify what that regulation, the regulation initially came out, said any marijuana establishment can't be within 500 feet of each other. But at town meeting floor, there was an amendment to specify retail. So as long as there aren't two retail facilities that are within 500 feet, it wouldn't preclude a cultivation and a retail within that period. So, so I think zoning wise, according to town solicitor, that would be okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
At our last meeting, one of your representatives said this was your only application and the only community you're considering.
Mhm.
I was just curious why Clinton?
Well, finding there's been a few interesting, I think, challenges when it comes to finding a host community. One, you need to find a community that is willing and wants to work with a marijuana company. But also, I think it was just a circumstance of finding the right property and finding a light industrial use property that can be used and sort of outfitted. And I mean, you're talking about millions of dollars of investment that's going to go into this building in order to make it into a state-of-the-art cultivation facility. And finding the right facility, ceiling heights, all that kind of stuff is a huge part of it. And that this one is just one of the few properties that KRD was shown, and everything sort of fell into place. So.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? All right, I just have one question that has nothing to do with you citing this town. It has everything to do with my curiosity. Is it Mr. Napoli?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Napoli, I saw in the stuff that we had that was given to us in your presentation that you will be the chief cultivator?
Director of Cultivation, correct.
Director of
Yes.
Cultivation, okay. I'm just wondering, how does one become a marijuana cultivator? And what is the sort of the
What was
progress
my
that one-
evolution
that one can
to
finally say to
arrive
someone,
here?
I am an expert in cultivating marijuana.
I
Refuses to
actually,
answer
I'm
under the
just,
grounds.
I really am just curious.
no, that's fine. I grew up in Acton, Massachusetts, and my family owns Idlewild Farms, so I grew up on the farm, working there, and I went off to college, and you know, this is back in the early '90s, and getting out of college is when this whole movement in the mid-'90s kind of started, and I opened up a business called the Hempist in Boston, and we have a store in Cambridge, Mass. As well, and Northampton, Mass. And we sell clothing and products made out of hemp, and basically it was a vehicle to help educate the population here in Massachusetts and get to the point where we are now, where we have a legal industry now, and so we could benefit from that. And I you know, I had a green thumb, and I also opened up a gardening center or a hydroponic grow shop in Boston back in 2009. And once the medical laws came about, I started teaching people how to grow their own medicine. And then after that, people sought me out. Some of the original dispensary applicants sought me out to be their director of cultivation or consultant on the project. And so I've worked on a lot of these projects, and we've helped design them all over Massachusetts. And it's just an industry I've been part of since before there was even an industry, and it's a great opportunity for all of us, and the town of Clinton as well, I think.
Okay, well, thank you, I was just curious.
Yeah,
because I read it and I said, gee, I wonder how you sort of stumbled into that line of work. And I just, as an aside, another aside, I remember when I was in elementary school, perhaps people of my age can also remember, they'd have a geography class. They'd teach you about the countries, and they'd say, well, in the countries, this country they produce, and a lot of the countries they produced hemp.
Yeah.
And you say, well, hemp, I didn't know what hemp was, hemp. Oh, hemp. Answer the test,
You
hemp.
found out.
I found out later, hemp is the marijuana.
Yeah, see, they tried to confuse people on that. That's what happened.
Well, no, they were using it for fabrics, weren't they?
Yeah, oh yeah, but it was the most important crop in the world up until the invention of the cotton gin and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
steam engine. And then when the hemp gin was being invented in the 1920s and 30s, that's when you started hearing the term marijuana. And So they made the whole plant illegal, even though it was touted in popular mechanics as being the next billion-dollar crop.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't allowed to ever happen. So, but now hemp was just made legal in the United States, so we're hoping that industry, the industrial side, comes back.
Okay, so children in the future will be seeing a lot of countries where they grow hemp,
Yeah.
including this one. All right, so, any other questions? There being none, what is the pleasure of the board with regard to KRD growers?
Well,
Anything?
I'd like the town solicitor to review this paperwork before I vote on this. There's no way I can vote on this until the town solicitor, looks this over.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that? or-
I just want to say that this is the last retail license we have in the kitty, and I'd like to give some, whether first come, first serve is the best thing in the community's interest, I don't know, but these people are here, they made an application, and I'd like to give them some indication that they have a spot reserved, subject to satisfactory review by the town solicitor and a satisfactory community host agreement.
Okay.
Would that be okay to make that motion?
Sure.
It would be okay to make any motion you want.
Well, I'd like to know that there's some support ahead of time.
Well,
That the application isn't supported until we've heard a review by town council, but we do acknowledge that you've submitted an application, and pending that review, we would expect to be able to move forward.
okay, we'll make the,
That's a motion.
that's the motion. Okay, that's a wordy motion.
Yes, it is, but you got the intent.
I'll second.
Motion is made to accept the application of KRP growers with the intention of proceeding pending the review and approval of the scientific cleanup report by town council.
And the entire application package by
Right,
town
right,
council.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, just KRD growers. I just want to make sure the motion is
Yes.
proper.
You know, that's an example of once an error gets made,
I know,
it's impossible to correct.
I
So
understand.
thank you very much. KRD growers. Okay, the motion that Bill made is seconded. Is there any discussion?
Just under discussion, I will be voting yes for this, just so we can go on to the next step. But I do have to look out for the taxpayers of the town of Clinton. But I will be voting yes just to go on to the next one. That doesn't mean I'm going to vote next on the next one.
Same for me.
Understood.
Anything else? Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
So good luck to you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda, in keeping with the Commonwealth's infatuation with greenery, is crabgrass cultivation facility at 54 Sterling Street.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Again, if you would say your names and
My name is Lynn McCarran. I am the managing director and owner of Crabgrass LLC.
My name is Brian McCarran, from Swampscott, Massachusetts.
Oh, yes, we're both from Swampscott.
You said you wanted your address, so.
okay.
It's all right.
And you have a proposal for cultivating marijuana down on Sterling Street. So we'll turn it over to you and you can tell us what you have to say.
It will be cultivating and processing for the purpose of wholesale, so no retail dispensary involved. We have now secured an LOI for 55 Sterling. The gentleman who
John Hogan, we were
John
working with
Hogan,
John
yeah.
Hogan, getting some of his help and guidance, and We've submitted what we think is a complete package based off of your guidelines, which were very comprehensive. So we've submitted the host community agreement, which obviously still needs to go out for a legal review, our entire business plan, and then I'll let Lynn talk a little bit about, you know, some of the experience so that you feel comfortable that, you know, that we would be good operators and good stewards of the business.
So my first experience with the cannabis industry was that first application process in the state of Massachusetts, which was, of course, a competitive process. And I was asked to be the director for CARE, the Cass Foundation. We came in second in Middlesex County. So I am intimately familiar with the regulations. Right now I am functioning as, well, I am a oversight and partner for a cannabis company in Colorado. And so I have oversight on compliance and, you know, kind of back office administration. And I also am the sales and marketing director. So I know about metric intimately, and also, you know, all the various phases of the process and how to make sure you're in compliance and following regulations. So that is something where, you know, I have ample experience in. I came to be interested in opening a dispensary earlier on when that first application process, which we're not doing now, because I have a healing arts background as well. And so for me, you know, question 3 and then eventually question 4 was a way to get medical cannabis made available for people with rheumatoid arthritis, you know, cancer, pain mediation, and that kind of thing. So that's why I was first interested in it. Unfortunately, the state decided to completely decouple the opportunity to have alternative, you know, care like acupuncture and stuff married with it. So it's so that's why I'm sort of just focusing on the wholesale side now.
And as you saw in our package, in our business plan, unfortunately wasn't able to make it. Our VP of operations has over 20 years of experience. He's been running a compassionate care clinic down in Rhode Island, where he's been in charge of the grow there for 4 years. He's got a number of certifications around oil processing. You know, it's not obvious. You actually have to go get training and know what you're doing with that. You're dealing with, you know, reasonably complex machines when it comes to actually making cannabis oil. So we think we have a good team here. And then, quite frankly, a lot of the focus is, and by the way, he lives 5 miles away, so he's a local. And we really want to source employees from the local community. We want it to not only be a boon from the perspective of you know, the host community agreement and the, you know, the revenue that comes with that, but also, you know, the jobs that we can create and create a you know, a positive you know, working environment and have a positive impact on the community. That's important to us.
Yeah, I mean, initially, you know, Don Varney, which is his name, Mr. Varney will have at least 2 to 3 full-time employees underneath him within 2 years. You know, I am going to be focusing on the administration and the, you know, compliance portion of it. I need somebody. I will need somebody who helps me manage that as well. Sales and marketing, you know, for wholesalers, because there's so much restriction on advertising. You know, you really have to kind of go out and go to dispensaries and be very active in that, person to person. So I will need a sales staff for that as well. So there's, you know, potential for, you know, that's what, 10 employees right there.
Our hope, one of the takeaways out of all this is that you get a good impression that we're solid people, that we will run a compliant business. Again, I really think that that's an underappreciated component, that there's a lot of regulations. I have a legal background as well. We've all read through these quite a bit. We understand what's involved to do that. And then again, that, you know, we want to source local people, and that, you know, that we have, I think, a very positive impact on the community.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
I think
Any
so.
questions from members of the board?
Couple, Mr. Chairman.
Go right
First,
ahead.
you've heard it before. Why Clinton? Why 55 Sterling Street?
Well, I think which was remarked before, that, you know, it's very difficult to find a community that is willing to entertain the idea of having a cannabis business in their town. So first of all, I mean, to be transparent, that's one of the attractive elements to it. I have to say, driving here, and you know, my husband was telling me, he's like, oh, you know, it's going to be you know, if this works out, it's going to be a nice place to work. I saw that you guys have rail trails and that kind of thing. So you know, you want to be in a place that doesn't necessarily, you know, seem, you know.
I think my comment was, it's not Lawrence, so. It's a nice town.
Yeah, so that's part of it as well. You want to feel, you know, we're going to be working here, and you know, you want to feel comfortable in a community. So I think that's part of it.
And then Don being five miles away
and having
was
somebody
certainly a
lives
big
right in
part of
the
it. And then it really hit it off with John. I know he's locally involved and has been a longtime resident of Clinton, and I think somebody you guys all know. He gave me a lot of help and guidance when I was going through, you know, through the process.
And
then
we've
as
looked at another lot of places, and
We have.
they don't always have representatives that
Yeah.
are as, you know, thorough and, you know, supportive.
yeah.
So that was part of it as well.
And then specifically as to the building, you know, needs some work and love, and I kind of viewed that as a positive. You know, it's up on the 3rd floor, so I think by the, you know, as the last people who were here, you know, we're making a large investment in the building as well. You know, from you know, tightening up the floors to, you know, putting in infrastructure. This is sat unused for a long time, is my impression. So, and I know there's a number of places that you can kind of point to that are like that. So, from a community perspective, to actually see a resource being utilized, I can't imagine wouldn't be considered a plus. So, I factored that in when we were deciding on a place that, you know, not everybody was beating down the door to go rent the 3rd floor of 55 Sterling Street, and so then also. A very, very important component that I think is underappreciated. How much is the landlord willing to work with you? You know, look, we know that there's provisional license before you get your real license. You've got, you know, you enter into an LOI that, you know, I helped draft, again, I have a legal background. Their willingness to go do that, you're gonna have other landlords who are like, no, you know, start paying me rent now. Well, I can't start paying you rent now when we don't even have a provisional license yet. So that was certainly a part of it, is how much the landlord is willing to work with you. That's sort of an instant elimination to a lot of properties. If you just don't have that sort of friendly landlord attitude, you just move on.
Is there a future intent to purchase the building, or are you going to, your plan is to be tenants?
I was interested in doing that, but they literally just sold it. So it just turned over. I don't even know if it's official yet. You know, in fact, I'm sure it's not.
Much to our chagrin.
Yeah, because we were thinking that would be a good, you know, year 2, 3 kind of thing. But I'm guessing a new owner is not going to necessarily be interested in turning over. But we did have some feedback from the incoming owner. Very pleased again that the 3rd floor is sat empty for a long, long time over there. So very pleased to have somebody who's going to come in and invest in the property. It needs it.
Okay, one more question, Mr. Chairman. We have, you're the second of 3 marijuana facilities on our agenda tonight. Is there, I mean, is this a race just to get first one in, get something, or is there a market saturation thing? Is it?
No,
I think, you know, we've, the other company touched on this as well, is that, you know, was it the kind of NIMBY thing? And so you're one of the communities that, you know, seems to be open to the possibility. And so I think that's why you have so many people interested. And frankly, the market right now has a supply issue. There is not a, you know,
shortages.
yeah, there's
Basically
just
shortages.
frankly shortages. So you know, the supply is not meeting the demand, and so you have, you know, people who are, you know, stepping up, entrepreneurs who are going to fill the need, and so.
But you're years, a couple of years from selling, being able to wholesale your
No.
product?
No,
No.
we have a
Licensed and built out and,
we have a pretty aggressive timeline. Now, maybe that'll end up being not realistic, but first off, you know, just by going through and creating a 50-page business plan, which we handed to you, that actually takes you a pretty far along in terms of the application process. Now, again, we had applied for medical back in the day, so we're quite comfortable with already having things around operational plans and training plans and all these kind of things. So really, the idea here is, you know, I don't think we're going to be able to, I know we're not going to be able to meet the special permit deadline of this Friday for the submission, so we'll be looking at the following meeting. But our hope is that since we've submitted everything you asked in the guidelines, what we're effectively waiting on is you know, review from council of the host community agreement, that, you know, we would have some form of contingent approval that will allow us, I use this analogy a lot, I'm sure Mike's getting sick of it, but to continue to push the ball down the field. We will be very quickly at that point be prepared, once we've had sign off and your final approvals, to, you know, a week or two to have our application fully into the Cannabis Commission. They've made it more friendly in terms of now through a portal and those kind of things that you can do. But no, we will have a pretty aggressive timeline. So the thinking is that, you know, then it becomes on the state. And can I give you an accurate guess as to how long it'll take to get it? I can't. Maybe May, if we got it in by February. That May would then be, we would then do a very quick build out because we know what we need to do.
Well, yes, and I would say that, you know, the
July,
building
August.
itself is, you know, it's bare bones, so you're not having to retrofit a ton.
No.
There's certainly, you know, challenges as far as, you know,
Flooring.
and things like that. But,
challenge.
you know, Brian and I have experience, you know, multifamily renovations and.
A lot of contracting
lot of
work. We've done
contracting,
that.
yeah. So, we're comfortable that, you know, once we are ready to go and have gotten all our approvals, we'll be able to execute in a
Quickly.
timely manner.
Yeah, even like building permit wise and stuff, we're not really doing anything structural, you know, like we're doing an underlayment on the floor so that water doesn't get through and whatnot. Well, that's not really, you know, something where you're doing massive electrical or anything like that. A lot of that's actually been upgraded in the building, so there's not a lot of construction element to it. It's really more about get the floor right, you know, get everything so it's tight and sealed, because, you know, you worry about moisture with these wood things for sure. Those kinds of things where it's not a massive build, then you're hanging lights and you're putting in secure doors and, you know, you have operational procedures.
We already
and
have
what-
vendors and things that we know we're gonna, you know, purchase from, and, you know, so, we're ready to execute.
No, if things move quickly, you know, we could be, you know, potentially have the green light, you know, in a July, August timeframe. But again, I don't know how long it'll take them if I submit at the end of February. Is having
Yes,
a
contingent on the
provisional
CCC.
Approval by May realistic? I don't know. I don't think there's a
You've
good way to
answered
get an
my question,
answer.
so.
Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions?
Dave?
Mr. Carey?
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're
I'm
set?
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're talking about the third floor? There are tenants on the second and first floor?
Yes.
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 Yeah. Do you see any problems as far as coexisting with them? I saw in the application that there was thought of expanding at some point.
Yes, well, you know, when we thought we could purchase the building, that was definitely.
A little more quiet, yeah.
But their furniture, there's a brick, they construct bricks, or they
Well, they
cut
do
bricks.
a special design, like like my brother did one when my mom passed away, for, you know, like a fire pit, and they'll put, you know, like your mom's name and their, you
Specialty,
know,
yeah,
you know,
stonework.
in living, you know, in loving memory. So they have a pretty neat shop. And then there is an artist above.
Who does restoration of antique furniture.
And they spoke to the other tenants, and they seemed fine with it. The big thing, of course, which everybody, I think, is a
Yes.
concern, is venting.
Yes,
And they don't want
proper
the place to
ventilation.
stink. One of the nice things about the building and being on the top floor, which is the third floor,
Yeah,
is
they
that
have
they
the-
already have easy
Venting.
access to, you know, you get these super power fans, right, that are sucking air out of here. So Phil, and you'll see in my in our application, controlling pressure in a room and all those kind of things, believe it or not, it's pretty important. So we'll have, you know, a good way to sort of exhaust the rooms, and at least it's shooting out of the roof. So, and because we're gonna have this waterproof, it's actually made of like a PVC material that'll be going over the entire floor. You won't have that sort of stink coming through that.
Through the floor, yeah.
And so now you're really saying, well, if I've got something that's venting and I've got something that's covering the floor, smell shouldn't be too much of an issue.
And then there are, you know, other things you can purchase to
And they're not,
mitigate this.
those aren't retail shops, I might add. It's,
Right, no, these
it's-
are craftsmen.
Yeah, and it's more like, I know the brick place, that's more of like an online thing that people order, and they
It's
supply
not-
all
they're not
around the
office
country.
buildings.
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah.
not displacing existing tenants?
No,
No,
no, it's the third floor has been empty for years, is my understanding. It looks like it.
Any other questions? No, other questions? All right, I have a couple of questions. Question one is very simple. It seems clear from your discussion and your application that you're processing the plant into oil. So you're not going to be selling anybody the
no,
flower
wholesale.
or the bud.
Yeah,
right?
you go to the dispensaries.
Yes, yeah, the dispensaries will be
doing that.
purchasing directly
Yeah.
from us, yes.
Okay, and this is a question that just occurred to me, given that, as Mr. Connolly said, this is the third, you're the second of three companies that we're talking to today about cultivation of marijuana. And what little I know about the cultivation of marijuana is that it's a fairly substantial plant with a lot of leaves, but what people are primarily interested in are the flowers or buds.
Correct,
Is that correct?
pretty much, but you can use the trim for oil processing.
Oh, you can?
Yes.
Because I was going to
So it
ask.
cuts down on waste.
I'm picturing all these factories with these tons of,
Oh, right, the
waste,
trim.
you
Yeah,
know
they
what I
really
mean?
call it, yes, the trim.
where,
yes.
where does that all go?
Well, you have, per regulations, you have to dispose of it in a very certain manner. And so, you know, there's incineration and things like that, you know, that you have to deal with. But when you do processed oil, especially if it's in the same place, you get to utilize the trim more. So you're using more of the plant, so there's less waste.
Okay,
The regulations, you would think that this is like handling nuclear waste. I am not kidding. I mean, just even the transportation requirements, they're a
Well,
little
seed-
over the top, let's just say. So this kind
it's
of
literally
stuff is,
seed to sale, which is fine, which
Yeah.
I understand. I don't have a
But it's-
problem with it.
it's quite comprehensive.
where
Yes.
would you transport the stuff?
To other dispensaries. So, what you
No,
do.
no, no, I'm
Oh, I mean,
talking
when
about
the
the
waste.
waste.
Oh, you know, I don't know.
There,
off the
well,
top of
no,
my
well,
head.
there are facilities because you have to incinerate them.
Right, it's gotta be incinerated.
So there
There's
are,
actual facilities that are in existence just to,
well, per the last
Disposal.
regulations, there should be, but you know, once you put in the metric system, once you've, you know, put that in waste, it has to be disposed of within, was it 72 hours?
Something like that.
Yeah, so there's a time frame. I would say that since my expertise is more making sure that gets done in the compliance department and you know, the administrative act portion of it, I would say that was a darn Varney question. He knows more the specific process. I just know that it has to be done within a 72-hour period, and, you know,
It's all tracked.
it's all tracked.
okay, all right. And I just thought,
No, it's,
I wonder if we're going to be approached someday about composting.
oh, no, you
Yes.
cannot,
You're not
no,
allowed,
absolutely
unfortunately.
not. That will not
Something we
happen.
would not have to worry about.
No, because you also have, you know, site inspections, and if anything was like that, you would.
Well, it'll show up in the system. It's even, you know, they
Right.
track from weights. When they say seed to sale, and if you make a mistake in the way you track these things
Well,
through
they
the-
track
it's
from
onerous.
water weight, you know, and then they track dry weight. And so you have to make sure that you've accounted for the, you know, why there's the wet weight to the dry weight. And so that's your waste, and then you have to track
Yeah.
that.
Okay,
It's comprehensive.
all right. Any other questions? Anything else that you would like to tell us? Nothing more?
That's it, unless you have any
Okay,
questions.
so what's the pleasure of the board with regard to Crabgrass LLC?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make similar motion to the one I already made for the other applicant, that we hold off making a final decision till everything's been reviewed by town council and his recommendation is made to us, and that you also move forward with developing a community host agreement. And I'd encourage you to look for ways to do more than the minimum.
Second.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just following up on my question, I'm a documented fan of one of the tenants on the first floor, the Matchstick Market, which they spent a lot of money renovating that space, and so I just want to make sure that we're not bringing in one business and squeezing out another. So I'll just,
No, and I will tell you that in the LOI, it's specific that there cannot be, that was their concern, was this smell, right? And so in there, like, it is specifically, in the agreement that we have to mitigate that, and it cannot, the tenants who are currently there cannot have a problem with us.
Right.
So,
And-
and I completely understand that and respect that, and, I would not wanna work with a place when, I'm.
But he's talking about something a little bit different. So that, when we said the expansion piece, that was maybe with the idea that we would be purchasing the
Sure.
building, but, so at this point,
Oh,
what we're
yes,
saying
I'm
is,
sorry,
we're
yeah.
16,000 square feet, that's it.
Yes.
There will be no additional expansion. We
Sure.
have no desire to push any business owner out of,
no.
out of the location or anything like that. And you know what, 16,000 square feet, that's why we started with it, it's plenty adequate. That's a big space.
We were
We're
just
gonna
there
have
tonight,
more than, we'll end up growing into it.
Yeah.
It's more than enough.
great. Yeah, I'm thrilled that more businesses are looking at Clinton, and I just want to make sure that there's
Yeah,
room for
nobody's
everybody.
getting pushed out, absolutely.
Put the sign up.
You have our word on that.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? There being none, all in favor of the
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And those opposed? Motion's carried. So I guess you talk to
Thank you
town
very
council. Good luck to you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's real true.
And continuing with the theme of greenery, we have the Central Mass Rail Trail.
Different kind of greenery.
Thank you.
Hand up in case we had technical difficulties. We needed to reference the slides on paper, and we brought them out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, whoops, no, I just moved it, Mike, after you did all that work to make it perfect. Okay, so. Now it's not displaying again.
Oh, she definitely is coming through.
So, and let's put it back in drive mode, it should go. There we go. Okay, thanks for your patience.
If
So.
you say who you are,
Yes, I will. I'm Franny Hodge. I am with the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust. A few other members of the organization have joined me this evening. Chris Epstein, our president, Jim Webster, our treasurer and clerk, and Rick Constad, who participates on the Trails Committee with me. The reason we wanted to come speak to you today is We presented to you just over 3 years ago when we were in negotiations with Pan Am Railroads relative to acquiring the Mass Central Rail Trail section in Clinton, and we were having difficult time making progress with the railroad. We now believe we're making progress and wanted to give you some information relative to what our plans are going forward with development of this trail. Many of you were on the select board when we presented a few years ago, but I thought it would be helpful for purposes of new members of the board and also for other members of the community to provide a little bit of background on what our organization does, what the rail trail is all about, and the progress we've made to date and what our current action plan is. And then, of course, we do want to ask for your support. So, the background on the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust, Michael Jakonski is actually one of the charter members of the trust. He was one of the founding members when the trust was originally organized in 1989. It was originally a simple land trust, so the idea was that if somebody had property that they wanted to donate for open space, that they had a trust that they could donate it to. The trust became dormant for a number of years, and when we started working on the town's first open space plan, the existence of the trust became known to the members of the open space committee, and we decided that that should be one of the goals and objectives to get the land trust back in an active state. So in 2000, we sort of reinstituted the trust. We became incorporated as a nonprofit in 2001, and we got our tax exempt status in 2002. Our charter is to provide for protection, awareness, and access to open space in Clinton. As we all know, there's not tons of open space that isn't already controlled by DCR, so the limited areas that we have, we do want people to know about them, to know how to use them, and to appreciate them so that they're protected. So some of the projects we've been involved in, we worked on the Clinton Open Space and Recreation Plan. We've worked tirelessly on things related to the Rauscher Farm, and in fact participated on the Town of Clinton Open Space Acquisition Committee before the town made the decision to move forward with that acquisition. We sponsor walks on various Town of Clinton parcels, and we were somewhat involved with getting the 40 Caves project moving. Chris and some of the other members of the group were more involved certainly than I was in that time frame. And another thing we've been working on is the development of the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail. So connections are one of the themes that we have in the organization, and I think we tried to reflect that theme in the open space plans in Clinton, because kind of connecting areas in the town is an important way to be able to use them for recreation and appreciation. So to give a little background on the Massachusetts Central Rail Trail, this was an active railroad that ran from Boston to Northampton. Operations were suspended in 1962, and parts of it have started to be developed for rail trail. In Clinton, actually the picture that I showed at the beginning, this was actually the way the railroad used to come through Clinton. This is before the reservoir went in. So this is a section of the old rail bed that's now under the Wachusett Reservoir. When the reservoir went in, the rail bed had to be moved, and that's when it was moved to the area that's now along the North Dike, and the trestle bridge was built and the tunnel that allowed it to extend and connect with the rest of the railroad bed on the Berlin side. So part of what's in the Clinton area is actually controlled by DCR because it runs adjacent to the Wachusett Reservoir. The section that we're interested in acquiring is the one that runs towards Berlin, is adjacent to Berlin. This complete rail bed and rail trail itself is 104 miles long. Some sections they have to take a little bit different routes to get on it, just based on the status, but more than 40 miles have been developed into trail, and approximately 60 miles are in various stages of protected status and development. And I can pause for a minute if there's any questions. Okay.
Well, yeah, I do have, seeing we're talking about the route. So basically, this is a link within the larger plan of the Commonwealth.
Yes,
to link Northampton to Boston
correct.
via, and so that would be for foot traffic, bicycles, et cetera, right?
Correct.
And it's going to run through Clinton, if it ever comes to be. I mean, I suspect this will come to be. I expect that I will be long in the grave, but I expect it will happen. I mean, not your little section, I'm talking
Right,
about the whole
yes,
thing.
exactly.
So, we would go out to Berlin, then it would be somebody else's worry.
Correct.
There's the rail trail that's running through Hudson. Is that part of this plan?
Excellent question. So actually, the Assabet River Rail Trail is a different rail trail.
Uh-huh.
The Mass Central Rail Trail also runs into Hudson. So it would intersect with the Assabet River Rail Trail in Hudson.
I see.
So the Mass Central does continue along Berlin Street and into Hudson, and it goes into the center of Hudson where it would cross the Assabet River Rail Trail.
I see. Okay. Thinking about other rail trails, so other rail trails in the area, such as the well-known one up in West Boylston,
Correct.
would they, is that West Boylston one part of this plan?
That is part of, so the West Boylston section is part of the Mass Central Rail Trail. The challenge between that little section of developed trail in Clinton is that it's active rail and part of that. So there's probably about 2 miles in Clinton that's not active rail, and then there's active rail between, sort of the edge of Clinton and moving through Sterling. So developing a path that kind of parallels that is one of the things that has to be considered. There are some alternatives to get from that location to West Boylston, but there is a challenge of that section being active rail.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you continue.
Okay, excellent. So, going back to this little section in Clinton, so it's about 7/10 of a mile, and, whether we get those connections to the Berlin end and to the West Boylston end in our lifetimes or ever, that little section is actually important to Clinton because it connects Clinton open spaces. So the Rauscher Farm is on one side of the rail bed, the Maffei property is on the other side of the rail bed. So access to the Maffei property, which is town of Clinton open space, you pretty much can only get by going through the Rauscher Farm, across the rail bed, and into that property. The trail continues into where the Woodlands open space connects. So there's actually a lot of connections to other existing trails by developing that little section of trail. We have had development of this trail as a goal and objective of the Clinton Open Space Plan since we created the first one. And then we try to, document as we get to the renewal of each plan, how much progress have we made. It's also a priority of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and they did call it out in their Commonwealth Connections Greenway Vision. So one of the things that then is helpful to us is because it's a priority of the DCR, projects along this trail actually get some priority when you're applying for grants and other things like that. And then there's also additional economic benefits if you get to something like the fully developed trail, because you have people coming through the community who may not live in the community who then shop, go to our restaurants. If this ever gets completed from Boston to Northampton, Clinton will be a perfect place to spend the night if you wanted to make the whole trip in a couple of days. So there's a lot of economic benefits to being near a rail trail. So to give you a little bit better idea visually, so the section in red is the section that we're trying to acquire from the railroad. There's a section in green, and I guess I should have brought a pointer, which I didn't. Whoops. Yeah, you can't block that out or it's going to stop. The section that goes over the base of the dam in the Nashua River, that then is all actually still open trail. So I think it might be easier to just show you on the map. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the section we're trying to acquire. You can see that it's connects the Rousher Farm to the Fay property, and then the Woodlands, which is right here. This section that goes along the reservoir is actually already trail, and it's actually one of the few sections of that DCR property where you can actually ride a bike.
Okay.
This section is also trail, and then it becomes active trail here. So that's to give you a little bit of context in Clinton. It does continue into Berlin, and then once you get partway into Berlin, the MBTA had the lease on that section of trail. They recently turned that over to DCR to develop as a trail. So from Berlin to Boston is now pretty much controlled by the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Whoops. I think that one probably gives you probably the easiest way to sort of see it in the context of Clinton. But to give you a couple other maps with trails on them, this shows some of the conservation areas in Clinton, and we've called out the Maffei Conservation Area and the Rousher Farm. We have the trail map marked in red and kind of yellow on that one, so you can see as it goes along the reservoir, and it just kind of gives you a view of how it looks with the other open spaces in Clinton. Another really interesting connection is the abandoned rail bed that runs from where the Weetabix is to the Nashua River Conservation Area. So that's another potential trail development where you connect those trails. It would also bring people who are on the trail into the center of Clinton so that they, are near where the shops and restaurants and some of the other benefits of the community are. This is a map developed by Rick. He's actually walked these trails and figured out where all of them go. So you can see where the trails come in and meet with the trails on the Rousher Farm. So the Mass Central Trail is the one that's at the top there, and then he shows where that comes back in to link in with the Woodlands property, and the other trails around Clamshell, and then some of the trails along the aqueduct. So pretty extensive trail system that's probably not well known, but now that Rick's mapped it for us, it'll give people a little bit more access to those interesting areas. And then to just highlight from the Commonwealth's point of view, this is a map from the Commonwealth Connections that they developed several years ago to prioritize the greenways in Massachusetts. And the Mass Central Rail Trail goes directly through Clinton. You can see in the right-hand side there where it connects with the Assabet River Rail Trail. And the other trail is the East Coast Trail that's planned, would actually come in through central Massachusetts and connect with the Mass Central Rail Trail at some point in the future. That's another sort of planned multi-state trail that Clinton would be pretty much in the heart of. So what we're trying to do. So when I came 3 years ago, we were sort of in this negotiation with the railroad, but we weren't making much progress. Our initial offer to acquire the property had been too low. They'd asked for a higher amount of money. We raised the money, and then they said, no, it's worth 5 times that now. So we just really didn't have the funds to proceed. So to get them back to the table, we were able to up our offer to them, and they came back almost immediately with a counteroffer. So we feel like we're getting pretty close from a price point of view. They want roughly, it's about 11 acres in Clinton. They wanted 10,000 an acre. We had offered 7,500. So we're hoping to agree on a price that's somewhere in between those 2 points. If you recall from my last visit here, they'd wanted 15,000 to 20,000, and that was really pretty much out of our budget and also what we thought that it would be worth. Some of the things that we want to do in parallel is this section of trail also includes a tunnel, and we have no idea whether the tunnel is safe for people to walk through. So we, as part of what we said we would include in our offer, is that it's dependent on determining the safety of the tunnel. And so there's 2 things we're sort of working on in parallel. One is trying to get a quote for what inspection of the tunnel will cost so that we can get some understanding of what, whether it's something that can ever be used again and what it would take to use it again. And then we're trying to lock the railroad in with the purchase and sale agreement. So a condition of it would be if we determine that this tunnel is not safe, that will be excluded from what we want to purchase, and we would investigate other, some of the other trails that Rick's outlined, potentially to be other ways to connect the rest of the trail. So we do want to get to a purchase and sale agreement with the railroad because we don't want to pursue additional grants to raise money if we don't know what the price is. So what we're proposing is a purchase and sale agreement that has some dependencies on the environmental review, including the tunnel, and that would be a condition of what we would include in the purchase and sale agreement. So what we're looking for from the town is we have some of the funds available to do this trail development. We're working on some grant applications. We think we're going to have to go through a couple grant cycles to be able to complete this because the first grant that we want to request is for the inspection services for the tunnel so that we know whether or not that's in or out and what we would consider. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is that many of the grants, such as the Mass Trails grants, are on a reimbursement basis. So we have to have the funds up front and then they reimburse you relative to that. So that's why, you know, pricing on some of these things is important for us to do. So one of the things we'd be interested in working on the town with is if we got to larger grants where the upfront money is required, but we have the amount that needs to be paid for to proceed with it, that we work with the town on that, similar to the way the project was done with 40 Ks, where you know, the town participates by being able to upfront some of the money. We raise the funds that are part of the match. We don't proceed if we don't get the grant. The other things that we'd be looking at down the road is once we understand the status of the tunnel, we want to look at the feasibility of what the other paths are. You know, if the path through the tunnel is feasible, then what do you do to get from the tunnel to the DCR side? Because it's a pretty steep drop from the tunnel to Route 70, and it's an even steeper drop to get down to the Nashua River. So what's the best way to get from that tunnel if it's feasible? Or if we have to make a different trail that goes through some of the other open spaces, what's the best way to get to the connection and connect us back to the DCR side?
Over the top of the dam?
So, yeah, so a lot of people like that idea. I can tell you that it's not one that John Scannell likes. So, and I did forget to include this in the presentation. I did meet with him in November to tell him, you know, we're trying to get this going again, and we'd like to get more awareness. One of the things he did give us permission to do is there was a mile marker on the North Dike for mile 36, what's the other one, 104 minus 36, 3662, I guess it is. And we asked if we could paint it so people know what it is and put a historic marker. And he agreed that we could do that. And he also agreed that we could put some kind of information in the kiosk that DCR has there. He does want it to be more of a historical nature because the priority for him is protecting the water. And he can't make any commitment on trail development around the water that doesn't, you know, their priority has to be what their priority is. So he did want to make sure that anything that we presented to them for review was more of a historical context so that people understood the history. In addition to meeting with you, we'll coordinate with the Conservation Commission, the Rousham Farm Management Subcommittee, Parks and Rec, and also Community Economic Development. We have met with Phil briefly because we wanted to understand if we're partnering with the town, you know, what are the ways that we can do it. So we'll continue to work with those other aspects of town government.
Okay. Is there anything that you need from us this evening?
So tonight, we don't need anything exactly. We will likely in the future. So what we're doing right now is we're going to put out a request for pricing for the tunnel inspection services. If those come back at some exorbitant amount, which we hope they don't, then that's something that we would need to revisit with the town and other organizations. We're also gonna try to get this purchase and sale in place with the railroad. And we think with that in place, based on where our negotiations are right now, that we're in the ballpark of something that we could raise to basically acquire that section of trail. So we think we can proceed with those two things. When we find more information about what's going on with the tunnel and the feasibility, there's gonna be lots more things that we need to partner with the town on to figure out, what's the next step. And I think the other thing we wanna understand, I didn't put this on my list, but when we thought we were getting close to acquiring the trail before, we do wanna meet with, the fire department and the police relative to, what their concerns would be relative to, having a tunnel, where the trail is, how you get emergency access if it's required and things like that.
Any questions from members of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank you and your, and the other people on your committee there, and Michael too, for all the work that you've done. I think that's a great idea, what you guys are doing. I've gone to school out in Western Mass, so I've seen the rail trail in Northampton.
Yeah.
I do have metal hip replacements. I'm not a walker, so, but I just want to thank you very much.
Electric bikes.
Mr. Chairman, I want to second that.
Thank you.
I can certainly appreciate how long it takes, the dedication to get to this point. We're talking decades, maybe, not years, but decades. And
I have brown hair when we started.
Yeah, I was going to say that, but then I thought it was going to be inappropriate. But it takes an awful lot of dedication to stick with something like this, because it seems like everything's arranged to stifle progress. And I want to compliment you and everyone working with you for the dedication to get to this point.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate the support. And if the businesses that are trying to move into Clinton are still here, I would like to make a pitch to them for their support. Because certainly the financial support of businesses in the community has really helped us quite a lot over the years. So we very much appreciate that as well.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
just as the new member of the board, I wasn't here last time, but I'm very glad you came, and I'm a huge fan of this project, and I want to echo what my fellow board members said. And just so people know, I know we touched on it before, but when people hear rail trail, they think, they might think it's an earthy, crunchy, kind of back to nature thing. This is a huge potential for economic, driving people to town. If you look at the success stories in this area and all along this, you can more often than not point to connections to a rail trail like this.
Yeah.
And having, if the tunnel works out, having, differentiators like that and connecting to the reservoir, it's just another feather in our cap. And if there's anything I can do to help, I'd be thrilled to do so.
Thanks.
So, I'd done some poking around beforehand. I mean, there are obviously challenges. If everything lines up, I mean, it can work, right?
Yes. I believe so, yes.
Okay. Because it does seem like it's challenge after challenge. I mean, so, the tunnel and connecting to downtown, I mean, just so people know, this isn't a pie in the sky thing.
No,
It can work.
It's absolutely doable.
Okay.
I mean, there are some unknowns,
Sure.
but yeah, absolutely. And I think, everybody Chris and I went to a conference relative to the other communities that are on this rail trail in the summer, and it just kind of gets you charged up again to see
Good.
what they've done and the progress they've made, and everybody gave an update on where things were, so it's really very energizing. The other thing I forgot to mention when I was on the slide, I did include a link to the economic benefits of a trail. This is the Erie Canal Trail Path, and that brings in $250 million annually to upstate New York. And they do have, like the rail trails around here, most of the people are day trippers, or people that
Sure.
live in the area. They use it all the time. But there are 22% of the people they surveyed were people that were visitors that were staying overnight. They were eating in restaurants, they were going from town to town along that path. And I think we certainly, are a great stopping point from Boston. And if people are coming from Northampton towards Boston, another place to take a rest before they hit the big city.
Absolutely. Please don't wait 3 years to come back.
No, no, I'm hoping to be back in the spring because we really felt like we made progress over the last couple months. And so we hope to have an update in the next couple of months.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
We're very
Yeah.
happy to hear from you and happy to hear that this might be moving forward and could
Yeah.
potentially be moving forward. I agree with my board members that it's potentially a great boon to the town. And I think something we should look seriously at. So thank you for your effort.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank
Okay. You want me to turn this off? No. No, mine's still connected. This is-
Are we all set? Okay. Next item on the agenda is Mr. Duffy, Director of Community and Economic Development, to talk about the FY18 CDBG grant, administration contract award, and the district local technical assistance grant funding. So, Mr. Duffy.
Mr. Jankowski, members of the board, good evening. Two very brief things. One, requesting an action from the board. The other is merely an advisory in anticipation of action at a future meeting. First, relative to the FY18 CDBG grant, I'm before the board requesting that the board award a contract for administrative services to Community Opportunities Group in the amount of $111,000. This is to administer our $800,000 Year 18 Community Development Block Grant. COG has been in town for the last 2 years. They've successfully administered our 16 and 17 grants, and after procurement, we have designated them, well, they were the sole respondent, so we're asking that the board authorize the chair to enter into an agreement with Community Opportunities Group.
That being the case, what's the pleasure of the
So
board?
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
A motion's made and seconded to grant the administration contract award to COGS Inc. Being moved and seconded, any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And
Aye.
opposed, motion's carried.
Thank you. And second here, just as an advisory, just a heads up, just today, announcements were made for invitations to apply for district local technical assistance. These are small amounts these are small grants that are made available to communities through the Regional Planning Commission to provide technical assistance in any of number 4 areas. We have applied for DLTA last in 2014, previously in 2012. We did the economic development self-assessments and a downtown housing study in 14. We did the priority development site analysis, which has fed subsequent efforts at Supernauts and on Main Street in 2012. I'm really just giving you a heads up that this availability of assistance is there. I know that the Board of Selectmen has talked about certain initiatives they would like to embrace, among those perhaps green communities. Not to introduce green one more time tonight, but this grant, this technical assistance might be an opportunity to further that initiative along in a meaningful way, prepared for application to the state. So I'll be coming before you again sometime before the application is due in March 3rd. It's a 21-page document that is the invitation. I'd be happy to share it with any of you via email or with a request with Mike. And we'll come back and see if there is something that is of interest to the board that we may want to pursue.
Okay.
Okay?
Any questions? There being none, thank you very much, Mr.
Thanks, Phil.
Duffy.
Thanks.
Moving on to administrative business. There's a request for a one-day liquor license from the Clinton Exchange Club, and that is in conjunction with their Irish Night event to be held at Clinton Town Hall on 3/9/19. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the one-day liquor license.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the one-day liquor license for the Clinton Exchange Club. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's carried. Emerald City Growers, returning to the theme of the night. The town solicitor has completed a draft host agreement with Emerald City Growers Incorporated for their property located at 843 Main Street in Clinton. One provision of the applicant's request was to split the processing fee, $5,000, to pay half up front and the other half after approval by the state. And so what's the pleasure of the board?
And Mr. Chair, there are representatives from the company if the board has
Do
any
you want to
questions
come up
you
and-
want to pursue.
Good evening, I'm John Franco.
How do you do, Mr. Franco?
Tell us, Simon.
So you're here, I guess, about the approval of the host community agreement, right? And town council has negotiated it?
Right, town council has reviewed, and this agreement falls within the parameters of what the board had discussed prior. The only real difference is there's a $5,000 processing fee to the town to move forward with this. And the applicant is asking to maybe split that cost, instead of trying to come up front with the whole amount. But beyond that, it's pretty much within the guidelines of what town solicitor had worked on other companies.
Okay. So, again, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like the applicant to give me some encouragement to support that idea of splitting the processing fee, because once we do it with you, we're going to be getting requests from other applicants. And I understand the obvious that you don't want to put out a lot of money unless you know you're going to be able to move forward.
Well, you know,
But-
after seeing how it's going for the board, I guess that request isn't fair. And I realized that this evening after, you know, you guys, obviously you're getting a lot of applicants. And the agreement that Bob had originally drafted, we're really fine with it, I guess, at that point. If,
Okay. That answers my question pretty well.
you know, and I apologize for honestly wasting Michael's time with it, Bob's time and yours. It totally falls on me, my mistake.
Well, I did say that I did understand the rationale, but I'm glad you withdrew that request. Mr. Chairman, one other question?
Yeah, sure.
I don't have the draft in front of me, but I recall in a section addressing future voluntary support for the community outside of the percentage. Pretty vague support for potential other activities and endorsements to the community from your group. And I'd like to see if we can firm up that commitment some way.
Well, we're open to that. The draft agreement that we originally provided, Bob Gibbons wasn't really, it was too different than the prior one that he had drafted. So what he had asked me was, can we stick to a standardized agreement based on your business model? And I said, sure, that's fine. So he had removed what didn't apply to us and gave us that standardized host community agreement that you used on a prior applicant. And it was vague there as well.
Is it identical language to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. You understand my concern that it basically is, once you get this vote from the board, you're off and running, and there's no pullback on that. So I guess I'd be relying on your good intentions to support, like the previous person before the board, things like the rail trail or something like that, especially if they were able to organize maybe support from the other marijuana applicants.
You know,
in town.
we do understand that it is a privilege. You know, Clinton is beautiful, it is wonderful. If you folks want us as people working in your community, that's great. We want to be here, and our eyes aren't closed. We understand what we're doing, where we're doing it, and, you know, the goals of the town.
That's all for me, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we endorse the draft community host agreement and allow the applicant to move forward in the process.
Is there a second? All right, I'll step down and second it. So that means you're running it from here.
I'm chairing the meeting till action on this
Is
motion
done.
is completed.
Mr.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just under discussion, I did vote against this the last time. The reason why I did, because they had problems down there with the police department, drug task force, kicking in the doors. I just don't feel comfortable voting for this. I'll be voting no.
Is there any other discussion on the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just clarification, because we did vote on this before. What did I vote on before that this is different?
Encouraging them to move forward
Move
to
forward.
develop this draft document.
Okay.
We've done that.
Right, but
Thank you.
is there any other discussion? We have a motion to accept the draft community host agreement and allow the applicant to move forward in their licensing process. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Motion fails.
Okay. I would suggest that you come back at the next meeting and see how Mr. Iacobucci, or if you can
Would he
sort of-
be able to vote on that,
Sure.
even though he
Sure.
wasn't here for this meeting?
Yes.
Double
Yeah.
check.
Yeah.
I'd like to,
He was here for the first presentation.
but he missed a meeting though. Just like Selectman LeBlanc in the past missed a meeting, then he couldn't vote on the issue again. because he
Yeah.
missed a meeting.
Not sure how that would apply, yeah.
I think we can get an opinion from town council.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty comfortable that this is not like a zoning supermajority
Oh, that's what that
type.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
this, I'm pretty sure Mr. Akabuchi can vote
Yeah,
on this
I'm
at the next meeting.
Practically positive. So that would be my suggestion, that you talk with town council, perhaps about beefing up that voluntary business and,
When I have had multiple conversations with Bob Gibbons,
yeah,
and he, it was basically his draft. He disregarded
yeah,
our...
I do understand that, and it's one of the reasons I voted for you. But my basic advice to you is to come back at the next meeting, because my recollection was, at the last, when we voted to encourage you to go forward, the vote was 3-2, with Mr. Iacobucci voting yes.
Yes.
So it would be to your advantage to try again.
Absolutely,
And you would
yes.
make Mr. Connolly feel better. And I mean, you know, we all like to think, and most of the businesses in town do support the community activities, such as the rail trail and the holiday concert and on and on and on. And so we would like to think that you would be doing that. But the basic issue is, if you wish to, you could try again at the next meeting.
Okay, we'll see you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, where are we here? We are at old and new business. Next item is the Memorial Day Parade Committee, and Mr. Bailey, our Veterans Agent, is here. Are you gonna come up?
Welcome.
Good evening, gentlemen. I know, you want to go first, Mike, or?
Well, I can introduce you by saying, Brendan and I have spoken, and we've also spoken sort of informally with the Director of Community and Economic Development, and we have some ideas for the memorial celebration, primarily in the park. What we think are upgrades, and we have some ideas on that celebration throughout the town, but we feel we need a working group to actualize them. And right now, the working group is myself, Mr. Bailey, and Harold Vaness. And we feel that we need a little more participation than that. Off the top of my head, I would say if the VFW and PAV, I think Mr. Vaness is there as representing the American Legion.
Right, yes.
Those are the three veterans groups in the town. And also any citizens that are interested or businessmen that are interested in participating. I think that we would be interested in having their participation. So with that, I would turn it over to you.
Well, I think you pretty much nailed it,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, but if we could get, it seems when the couple of weeks leading up to Memorial Day, a lot of great ideas come up, but it's too late. And then, during it, there's some constructive criticism, and then there's just criticism, but, and then there's, so people both from, I know we had some from the fire department last year, some from the school offering to kind of help us, and then it just kind of dies on the vine as the fall comes and the winter. So if we could get, like, say, some kind of small committee together, like I said, a rep from, maybe some of the organizations that do participate, or, Parks and Rec, or any, like I said, any, resident of Clinton that wants to participate, because the at least to my knowledge, the Legion kind of ran this, for the last, I don't know, however long, 50 years, and I think Mr. Vaness is the only one left. And as you know, two people can't get out there and herd those cats, and it just kind of falls apart. And without the community involvement, it's just going to get to that point where, it's just going to kind of die on the vine. So yeah, if we could get, I don't know how to go about that. If we could kind of put a feeler out to the community, maybe, get some kind of committee together. I mean, it is January, but it'll be May before we know it. And so sometime in maybe February, April, we'd at least get a kind of a smaller group together and see where we want to go forward. I know you and I talked about the flags and so forth, and get.
Well, we don't want to give away too many
Well,
good ideas.
we'll patent that.
Some of these people will steal them.
But yeah, if there's some way to get that out and get some of those groups involved.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we put an ad in the paper, or recruiting some volunteers and some business owners, or?
Well, we could just follow the route that we've done with most of the subcommittees, I guess. What is that, Michael? We put an ad in the paper?
Yeah.
That'd be great.
I mean, I would be interested in accepting a motion that puts that ad in the paper, and also perhaps writes some letters of invitation to the VFW, the PAV. Who else did you mention? The fire department?
VFW, PAV. Maybe like I know the school, and I don't want to speak for the school. I know they had some interest last year. Joel Bates is the chairman of the school committee, maybe, or Steve Meyer, the superintendent, see if they've got anyone that, because their bands do participate and so forth. But
So if we could have that.
Chairman, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. So any discussion? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed, motion's carried. So we hope that everyone will
perfect.
jump into the pool and find that the water's fine and work on the Memorial Day celebrations.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other old and new business?
I do have an old and new business. On the new tax bill, Michael, there's a line item that says IE on the tax bill, income and expense, and some people are being charged $50. And I know some people went to the town hall complaining about it, and they're all got pointed to the Board of Assessors office. So I'm curious, why are they being charged this IE on their tax bill? And the IE stands for income and expenses. And where does that $50 or that money go to?
Okay. Yeah,
No idea.
I can try to find out. I haven't received any of those inquiries, so I'll look into it.
Thank you.
I have a bit of, I guess it's new business, and that is having to do with the upcoming National Municipal Association conference. A number of the Board of Selectmen and staff are going. It's the weekend of January 18th, and it's a series of workshops and various other things. And I mean, the town is good enough to, put us up at a hotel and pay for our meals. And so I thought it would be worthwhile at the next meeting to sort of discuss some sort of plan for us to present what workshops, et cetera, we went to while we were there, and sort of brainstorm in public about what we might do as a result of those participations. If the board has no objection, I'd put that on the next Selectmen's meeting's agenda.
After the,
Yes,
next meeting after the MMA.
yeah, but I mean, I think we want to,
You want to vote
if
on
we're
it?
going to discuss it, well, I think we have to go through this
Yeah.
process and then put it on the agenda and say, yes, we're going to
I
do it.
understand.
The open meeting law is a wonderful thing, but it sort of makes things overly complicated sometimes.
Do you need a motion for that, sir?
I don't think so. If you just say, if nobody objects, I'll just put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
No, I think it's great. I'm not usually a fan of these sort of things, but last year was, as my first, there was a thing on cannabis, there was a thing on budget best practices that I hope to implement this year to help town meeting run a little smoother, so I'd be happy to, do we want to talk informally about which ones we're going to so we don't double up? There's actually a few that I'm interested in.
We'll do that. I
have
haven't,
no idea which
I
ones.
haven't,
Okay.
yeah, I haven't decided yet.
All right.
They seem to have changed the format this year from previous years, and I'm having trouble figuring out
Okay.
which ones fit
Yeah.
and work. The ones I seem interested in are conflicting, so
Concurrent.
I'm trying to,
Okay.
The next meeting would be when, Michael?
2 weeks.
It'll be 2 weeks, January 23rd.
Oh, that would be
Yeah.
after.
We're doing,
Yeah, we
Okay.
switched.
So sometime before, I mean, we can sort of informally say, well, I'm going with this and you're going with that.
Great.
Okay?
okay.
All right, that's all I have for any other old and new business? Also under old and new business is goals and objectives discussion. Are there any goals and objectives to be discussed this evening?
Just, Mr. Chairman, we can delete the tax classification subcommittee that is over with.
Yes.
We can delete that, please.
We adopted the subcommittee's recommendation for the future, so.
Well, we did, yeah. Okay. All right, so that's off of there. Who says we never get in? Any committee reports? There being none, that seems to complete the agenda for today.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? We're adjourned.
Too late to get some signs.
When you arrive in Boston.